Hi everybody, it's Dr. Ron here, and thank you so much for pressing play to talk about a subject that I am very passionate about, and it's type 2 diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes reversal. So what we're going to talk about is why most type 2 diabetics should not be on insulin. And I'm not saying all, I'm saying most type 2 diabetics. And to understand why, you have to understand how type 2 diabetes works. So, type 2 diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance. What does that mean, insulin resistance? You hear a lot about that in the media. So what that means is that as we consume carbohydrates and sugars, right, our body absorbs it and turns into glucose. And glucose is sugar. And as the sugar enters our body, our pancreas will releases this hormone called insulin. And what insulin does is it tells our muscles right here to take up that sugar molecule and use it as energy. Now, if the muscle doesn't use that sugar molecule as energy, it turns into fat. And as it turns into fat, the muscle doesn't really like it. Your body doesn't like being fat. Your body will tell the pancreas, hey, pancreas, stop secreting so much insulin, because we're just getting way too fatty. And the pancreas is like, well, there's a lot of sugar coming in. I'm still secreting a lot of insulin, but since you're not taking in the insulin, then there's no reason for me to keep going. So what happens is that you have all this blood sugar coming in from the foods that you eat, and the sugar goes higher and higher and higher. And that's the concept of how type 2 diabetes is developed, right? So if the disease of type 2 diabetes is too much insulin, then why are we putting more insulin into our body if we were a type 2 diabetic? It doesn't make any sense. And the idea comes from the fact that when we inject insulin, our blood sugars come down. Well, that's all well and true, and that's great, but if we inject insulin into our body, our blood sugar comes down. That means our body is more resistant to the insulin, because now we have way more extra insulin into our body, and that worsens insulin resistance, which in effect worsens type 2 diabetes, right? And so that concept doesn't make any sense, to inject insulin to catch up with undigested blood sugars, because you're just making type 2 diabetes worse. You're making insulin resistance worse, and it worsens the progression of the disease, okay? So let's think about that for a second. So now we have extra insulin that's injected into our body if we are type 2 diabetic. It forces the muscle to take in more blood sugar that we're eating, okay? And a lot of people on insulin actually eat more carbs because the insulin allows them to eat more carbs. Then all we're doing is forcing this process of blood sugar into the muscle, and the muscle keeps storing it, and that's why people on insulin gets fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter. And then the lean muscle mass gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So people on insulin have a higher fat to muscle ratio is because the fact that all we're doing is making their type 2 diabetes worse. They're just storing more fat. It doesn't make any sense. So instead of injecting insulin, why don't we decrease the amount of carbs that we eat, so that the muscles can say, hey, you know what, there's not a whole lot of carbs coming around. I'm going to start burning the fat that I already have, right? If I start burning the fat that I already have, then I'm going to build more lean muscle. Then the lean muscle to fat ratio in the body becomes increased, so you have more muscle per pound of fat. And that's what we want to do, and that's how we're able to get people off of insulin in my practice. That's how we get people off of a lot of these type 2 diabetic meds in my practice, is to carb restrict and not to give more medicines just to catch up with the way that people eat. It doesn't make any sense to do that. It doesn't make sense for me to prescribe medicine when you're able to do this using food. When you're able to do this using food as medicine, right? So as we restrict more carbs, we want to increase our protein and fat and vegetable intake, okay? If we increase those three categories don't spike the blood sugar, now our muscles can say, hey, there's not a whole lot of blood sugar coming on. I can be more sensitive to the insulin that's already existing in our body. And I'm allowing more blood sugars to come in because there's not a whole lot around anyways. So what happens is now the body is in a metabolic state where it metabolizes fat, which means the body will start breaking down the fat and to start building the muscle. Because guess what? When you deplete your body of a lot of carbohydrates, your liver actually shrinks. Your liver stores a lot of carbohydrates called glycogen. And as it shrinks, it depletes the stores of glycogen, and then what gets burned next is fat. So if you carb restrict, you'll start burning fat. But then you'll also start burning protein, which means you may break down muscle unless you eat a lot more protein in. So what does this all mumbo jumbo mean? It means that if you are type 2 diabetic and you eventually want to get yourself off of insulin with the physician's help, you have to start eating right. You have to increase your protein and carbohydrate and fat intake and eliminate a lot of your carbohydrate intake, meaning bread, rice, and pasta, and sweets, and tortillas, and chips, and liquid calories like sodas. Okay, those have to be significantly limited, if not eliminated, right? And this is the concept behind our type 2 diabetes reversal plan that I have, and it's available for you, by the way. It's completely free. It's available for you. If you go to ruanmd.com, ruanmd.com, it goes to the link, and there it describes what the plan is. And the entire plan talks about having foundations for the way that you eat. Okay, what we did is that we divided food into several different categories, 6 different categories that we call layers. And these are the layers of foundations, and you build upon layers of foundations. And so when you are able to categorize food into different categories in your brain and even on paper, you don't worry about counting carbs. You don't worry about counting calories because it doesn't matter what the calories and carbs are, because you know that each of the category does something for your body. So I know that the first category, which mostly vegetables, is not going to spike my blood sugar intake. I can eat as much as I want. The second category is lean protein intake. I can eat as much as I want. The third category is healthy fat intake. I can eat as much as I want without spiking the blood sugar level. And it's insane. It's an insane concept to not count carbs or count calories when you're trying to improve or reverse type 2 diabetes. But by counting carbs and counting calories, what we're doing is that we have a very restrictive mindset, and humans just don't like to be restricted. And so it's so important to categorize food, to know every time you put something in your mouth what category it belongs to and how much you're supposed to have. So 3 of the categories in the type 2 diabetes reversal plan that we have at ruanmd.com, ruan.com, are completely unlimited because it does not spike the blood sugar. Okay, and the last 3 categories are limited. Okay, Jim, you posed a really, really good question. You said the brain needs carbs. How do you deal with its requirements? Okay, the brain does not need carbs. The brain needs glucose. The brain needs 50 grams of glucose. Glucose is energy subunits, okay? And these energy subunits, these sugar molecules, don't necessarily come from carbs. If you eat protein, the protein can also turn into the glucose molecule that supplies your brain. And these are called branched-chain amino acids. Okay, branched-chain amino acids is BCAA. BCAA you see everywhere on protein supplements. When they talk about that, these are the protein, the amino acids that break down into glucose, and the brain can use it. So, Jim, the brain does not need carbs. The brain needs glucose to function. Secondarily, your liver also produces glucose for the brain to function. And it does that through a process called gluconeogenesis. Okay, gluco means glucose, and neogenesis means newly make stuff. So your sugar, your liver can make the sugar that your brain requires. Okay, by depleting its stores of glycogen, which is what carbs are stored in the liver. Jim, I hope that makes sense to you, because that is a very big misconception in the medical world, in the nutrition world, is that the brain actually needs needs carbs to function, but really needs just glucose. Okay, and there are people, there are people who are on what's called the ketogenic diet. Okay, the ketogenic diet basically eliminating carbohydrates and just having protein and vegetables. A lot of people on this diet who can still survive. If they're still surviving, that means the brain doesn't necessarily need carbs. They just need that glucose that they're intaking from the protein. So Jim, that is an excellent question. I'm really glad you mentioned that. In fact, I'm going to hit like on your comment right now because I like it so much. Okay. So, and as we eat, as we use food to nourish our body, we have to know what it does to our body. Okay, and going back to my diabetes reversal plan, that's exactly what we try to do. We have you categorize food in each of the categories so that you can use that into your brain and know which food is going to spike your blood sugar and which food is going to help you get off of medications. And I hope that makes sense to you. So I'm going to finish up this broadcast for now, but go to ruanmd.com, ruanmd.com, and download my free plan. You put in your name, you put in your email, and then it'll shoot you an email for confirmation, and then you'll get a link to the product. Okay, it's completely free. There's no obligations. You don't have to buy anything, but it's something that I put out there, and it's being widely successful. All right. So no problem, Julianne. Deborah, how you doing today? I'm glad you guys joined. Felicity, are you here too? Yeah, you're out there, Felicity. Yeah, go to the website ruanmd.com. Download the plan. Read more about the plan. There's a lot of people who have had tremendous success on that plan. Actually, over 300 people since December of 2015, which is about 7-8 months ago. Okay, 300 people have had tremendous success, and a lot of them have eliminated all their medicines, and over 90 of them have eliminated their need for insulin on this particular eating plan, because we want to use food as medicine for the rest of our life, right? It's going to save us, it's going to save a lot of heartache, it's going to save us money, it's going to feel completely wonderful. Lisa Green, your daughter's a type 2 diabetic. Oh wow, and you almost lost her 3 months ago. Oh wow, that's crazy. And I'm really hope that she's all right. But yeah, Lisa, you know, information like this is super important. Please share this post. Please share this video. Put it into your feed so that your friends and family can understand this concept as well. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go. I gotta see some patients, but I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you.